Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Kingsman: The Secret Service. About a decade or so ago, it was kind of decided by the Hollywood powers that be that there really wouldn't be fun Roger Moore-ish James Bond movies anymore. It was all in the very Bourne-esque or the darker Daniel Craig Bond movies that had a lot of shaky cam and were moodier. And suddenly those kind of man's cavey films weren't really around anymore. No one really wanted to have fun with their spy movies. You could still have fun, but you had to emphasize the weight of the world and our post 9/11 era. Thankfully, the Kingsman has decided to do away with all of that kind of crap and have a fun Roger Moore-ish spy movie while still giving us a spy movie that's up to date in terms of the violence. Kingsman takes the spy genre and throws it to a very studio director-directed kind of film, a la kind of current comic book Hollywood filmmaking, and makes it all an incredibly fun, big-budget studio, incredibly violent ride that I didn't think you could do with a spy movie anymore. A young kid played by Taron Egerton. His father died in the late 90s. Colin Firth was his partner, and he saved Colin Firth's life, so he gives him a medal and tells him if he's ever in trouble to call this number. After he is arrested, he decides to call that number, and Colin Firth gets him out of the police's clutches, tries to recruit him to be one of the Kingsmen, an elite independent secret service of spies who go around saving their customers and saving the world if need be, and not running under any government oversight. He's being recruited through a very vigorous recruitment process to eventually become a Kingsman and join Colin Firth, Mark Strong, and Michael Caine in help defending the world, as at the same time Samuel L. Jackson's character Richmond Valentine is trying to destroy the world and get all of the world powers under his control so he can put his extreme climate change, evil megalomaniac plans into action. Matthew Vaughn is the kind of big budget studio director that loves big budget studio filmmaking, and those are the kind of big budget studio filmmakers that I love to watch. He has a love for it, he really gets off on making these kind of films. He's a big budget studio director for the modern era. He really likes comic book movies. He's directed several comic book movies. He directed Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class. This is based on a comic book. His film Stardust was based on a Neil Gaiman novel, so he really loves the kind of comic book world. You can tell that throughout this film. There's some people who do these bright, exaggerated colors and do a comic book look, and kind of the thought behind it was like, oh, well, it's a cartoon, it's a comic book, it's stupid, and things need to be bright colors because it's for kids. And you can tell they're just kind of full of shit. But then Matthew Vaughn comes along, and he can tell he loves this kind of shit. He knows who John Byrne is. He knows exactly why he's trying to use these certain colors. And he knows his film references. He gets Roger Moore kind of James Bond movies. He knows what In Like Flint is and the Avengers, not the Marvel's Avengers, but I'm sure he actually knows them also, but the Spy Avengers, the BBC series. He liked The Man from U.N.C.L.E., the TV series. And he's using all these cultural references and mixing them all together to make a really fun comic booky action figure cartoon kind of a movie. This wasn't a big property kind of comic book. This wasn't a huge comic book. It was a comic book that he wanted to do. This shows the kind of director he is. There's certain people who direct comic book movies and fantasy films and sci-fi films because they're put in that position and they don't want to let go of having a big production. And usually it works out to be a pretty bad movie because you can tell they don't love it. But Matthew Vaughn isn't that way. Matthew Vaughn really loves this kind of shit. And because of that, you get that through the screen. There's an energy throughout this movie that you're just like, oh my God, I love watching this. I'm having such a great time. It's kind of infectious. It's similar to what happened with Guardians of the Galaxy. Not as much. Guardians is way better. Matthew Vaughn kind of gets the cheese of Roger Moore and In Like Flint. And he in himself is kind of a cheesy filmmaker, but it kind of works for him. He takes the cheesy kind of Hollywood mode with his own kind of cheesy direction, and the results come out all Gouda. The thing is with Roger Moore Bond films is everyone forgets that Spy Who Loved Me is a great Bond movie, or For Your Eyes Only is a great Bond movie. The other one's not so much, but those two show a style that can work. That style has worked. We sat through enough of them that didn't work. I've complained about this with Westerns for forever, but how everyone, if they're doing Western, they have to do a Leone Western. Because that's cool, that's hip, that's sexy, that's dirty, that's grimy, that's quick cutting. That's what everyone knows about Westerns now. Because everyone forgets about John Ford. And to be honest, it's a little annoying. It's like, okay, you're doing the same reference everyone else is doing. And with spy movies, it's pretty much like everyone wants to be Jason Bourne or the Daniel Craig Bond films. It feels like we're kind of in this one mode, and here Matthew Vaughn comes along and does it completely differently, and that's really refreshing. Now, Kingsman isn't just trying to emulate one of those, it's trying to update it. The violence in this film was very extreme. I think this is back to the violence Matthew Vaughn did in Kick-Ass. I didn't expect to see that from a major studio film. Maybe that's why he wanted to do a movie like The Kingsman. I know when he was trying to do Star Wars, one of his stipulations is that they would up the violence, and they refused to, so he didn't end up doing that. Same with Days of Future Past, I believe. Now, this is based on a comic book, but apparently only 3 characters from the original source material made it to the movie, and it really has nothing to do with the comic at all. He just kind of used the title, and that's about it. It's kind of like a Big Hero 6 Disney adaptation. The way he shoots violence, I don't really like action sequences where the camera's moving all over the place, what Jason Bourne did or Paul Greengrass does, where it's always shaking while it's doing it, to kind of emulate that you're in this tense situation, all these things are going on, that you're overwhelmed. Hunger Games did it ad nauseum and used the theory way too much, so the theory just fell apart, and I was just annoyed, and it was a badly shot movie. Kingsman kind of does what Captain America Winter Soldier did, where it has the camera shake enough, basically so the Hollywood suits will get off their back. He knows how to do that in a way that you can still see everything that's going on. He actually gets it to work in an amazing action sequence in a church where there's just tons and tons of people fighting with Colin Firth, and he gets that shaky cam, but also well-purposed, well-plotted out kind of action sequences to work at the same time that very few directors can. I think the Russo brothers did do that in Winter Soldier, but this is almost more so because I feel like he makes it work exactly for the tense of the scene. He's doing it probably because they're making him do it, but he understands the theory behind it. It's a really meshed, well-done Hollywood committee filmmaking that really works for it. I don't see that a lot, and I kind of love it when I do, because, you know, the cliche critic hates Hollywood films. I actually like a well-done Hollywood film and a well-done kind of action movie, and The Kingsman is very much a Hollywood action movie, but directed with an auteur voice to himself, but still done in that studio way. I also like how well cast it is. It feels like he got the best British actors to be in this film. You have Michael Caine, you have Mark Strong as Merlin, everyone has Arthurian code name to him. Colin Firth, I thought throughout the film he's kind of playing like a Roger Moore type. I almost kind of wanted a Roger Moore cameo, but apparently what they did is they told him to play more David Niven, because Ian Fleming actually wanted David Niven to play James Bond, and that never happened except in the Casino Royale, the 60s comedy. But it did feel like that kind of very stiff upper lip, tea drinking Englishman that like Roger Moore represents. I think Colin Firth is the only actor who could even get close to that kind of representation. And it's also, there is a kind of a trick with movies a lot of the time when you want to have one generation and another generation, you have them represent 2 different acting styles, and it kind of emphasizes the difference between the 2. Colin Firth and Taron Egerton really have really good chemistry together, and I think they play off each other very well. Taron Egerton's playing more of like this poor English working class guy, and Colin Firth is playing more of the posh Roger Moore type. Colin Firth, this isn't the type of film you usually see him in, and I think he actually did an incredible job. He almost feels like he's at home at this, like this is his 20th kind of action film. But in actuality, I don't ever see him in action films. He felt very well suited for it. Taron Egerton, he is kind of playing that role that you can get away with a lot of exposition for. You can have a blander person in the role because it's almost more of a plot device, but they do a lot more with Taron Egerton than that. He does a lot more with it, so the part becomes a lot more alive. Samuel L. Jackson is always great, and I think he was great as a villain. He doesn't get to play as many villains as he used to, and maybe that's because of the Avengers. And I love Mark Hamill doing more of his voice acting chops in this film, but I'm a huge Mark Hamill fan. He was part of the reason I saw this movie. Kingsman: The Secret Service is influenced by films that are a lot more bloated than Kingsman really is. Kingsman is compact, it's action-packed, it's fun, it's Hollywood, it's funny, it's everything you kind of want in a big studio, big action, big production kind of movie. And it's interesting when you think about how each of his films, his last 3 films, Kick-Ass, First Class, and this, are about young people coming into situations and learning about this whole new world and basically becoming superheroes. And Kingsman's kind of like that also. And it almost feels like at this point he's well tuned to this kind of a story. Like he's directed this is his 3rd time basically doing this story, and you can see his progress and how he's become even more well seasoned at doing that. It shows like an evolution of a director. Matthew Vaughn is really good at really fun, very violent comic booky movies like almost nobody else. I'm kind of shocked Marvel hasn't even gotten to use him, because he's almost like the best Marvel director that Marvel doesn't have. He really gets how to do an origin story movie without it being like boring and you going like, oh, another origin story film. In fact, I didn't actually think about how it was an origin story movie the whole time. Kingsman: The Secret Service, if you're always complaining like they don't make James Bond movies like they used to, like Roger Moore, the stuff I grew up with, it definitely gets into that. But also, it's a very violent film. It's a very speedy, fun film. It's the kind of fun action postmodern spy movies that are kind of right up my alley. And if all that sounded exciting, I think it'll be right up your alley too. And you can see all the back alleys it goes into. It's both a throwback, but almost feels new because we've been away from these kind of films in a while. And it shows a love for those goofier kind of James Bond movies that we really haven't had since GoldenEye, because most of them just felt like punny and annoying and stupid. This isn't any of that. This shows the fun and why those kind of films worked in the first place, but bringing that back within a kinetic, fun energy and lots of blood all over the fucking place. So if you have seen Kingsman, The Secret Service, and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.